Hey everybody, Jon Easdon here from Anglers Covey, and thank you for joining us for another edition of Bug of the Month. Well, it's late April. There's no ice on the lake. You know what that means, ice off. One of my personal favorite times of the year, and the Bug of the Month this month is actually the chironomid. We've talked about chironomids in the past, but we're going to dive into it in a little bit different concept this time, and walk you through the life cycle, how we're going to fish them, and especially right now at ice off, where we don't need any sort of watercraft or anything. We can do everything right from the shore. So chironomids are a vitally important food source in all of the lakes, pretty much all over the world. Trout love to consume chironomids. Now chironomids are a little bit different than a lot of the insects we talk about because they have a complete life cycle. A complete life cycle means that they are an egg, a larva, a pupating or emergent stage, and then an adult. So 4 different stages to those bugs. The really crazy thing about chironomids is they will hatch year round. They're really going to be prevalent in late spring, early summer. That's when we focus on them here locally. And you know, this being late April, I'm pretty excited to fish chironomids today. So when we start talking about chironomids, we're going to start at the larva stage, and the larva stage is really interesting. Larvae can actually be in the lake bottom for a couple months up to a couple of years before they complete that cycle and start to pupate. So even if you're not seeing bugs flying around on the surface or around you, you can bet that there's millions of chironomids staging to start that pupating stage on the bottom of the lake. Now, we're going to focus on areas that have a lot of sand and silt. I mentioned that already, but those are areas where those larva burrows are actually going to be located. Now, when they start the pupating stage, it's really interesting. They will come out of their burrow, and sometimes they'll stage there for a long time. I mean, they could stage there for days, actually, before they start to pupate. So if you think about envisioning the bottom of the lake, and then a couple inches to a foot above the lake bottom is just a bug sitting there, head pointing up, rear pointing towards the bottom, and they'll wait until they completely finish that stage of the metamorphosis. They won't start their ascent until that stage is completed, so sometimes that can take some time. Once they do start to pupate, a midge will swim up, it will stop and oftentimes sink. It will swim up, sink, swim up, and sink. And so this whole process can take quite a bit of time. It can take up to an hour. So if you envision that, if you envision just a static indicator rig and you've got some chop on the lake and your flies are doing this bobbing up and down, that actually perfectly imitates exactly what a pupating chironomid does. So that's why it's so effective. Now, one of the things with this whole process is fish will target those bugs in various stages of that pupating cycle. And then of course, the bug will make it to the surface, molt, the adult will pop out and fly away. That's kind of the whole life cycle. When we're talking about chironomids, we're primarily focusing them in the subsurface or pupating stages. While chironomids are active year-round, kind of the ideal water temps that we're looking at, and when I say water temps, I'm talking surface water temps, are around 48 to 60 degrees, or ideal. So if you see surface water temps like that, it's an ideal environment for these chironomids to start hatching. Now, another interesting thing about chironomids is these larvae can live in a couple feet of water or even 100 feet of water. So if you're fishing an area that's really, really deep, thinking about that pupating process, that amount of time can be very, very long. So it could take 10 to 12 hours for that bug to actually make it to the surface depending on the depth of the lake. Now, when we focus on these chironomids, I'm going to be looking at them in all sizes. My kind of go-to are size 20 clear to size 10. As we start going through spring a little bit more, we're going to start seeing some rather large chironomids. We refer to them as the buffalo chironomid, and that's when we're going to fish those larger profiled chironomids. So you've probably seen them in the fly shop. They're in all various sizes, and that's kind of a rule that I like to have, is I like to have a wide variety of different sizes and colors of chironomids. And you'll find these patterns in all sorts of different colors. in nature, when you look at a pupating chironomid, they can be all sorts of dynamic colors. And this is because of the amount of hemoglobin that's actually in their bodies. The hemoglobin is what actually helps them emerge to the surface. And I mean, I've seen them in blues, a lot of red. You'll hear a term called a bloodworm. A bloodworm is just a chironomid in its larval stage. But you can tie these in a lot of different dynamic colors. You've seen in some of our tying videos just a wide variety of different types of chironomids. And you want to have a good variety because the fish will pick on one or the other. So one of the things with rigging, there's a lot of ways you can fish chironomids. Honestly, one of the most effective ways is a static indicator rig. And with the static indicator rig, this is going to allow me to fish all sorts of various depths. And again, you've heard us say a lot of times in these stillwater videos, depth is key. So I want to be able to have some adjustment in my depth and be able to adjust on the fly for all sorts of various different depths. This time of year, right around ice off, most of the fish are actually going to be closer into shore. So I'm going to be focusing on a little bit shorter depths to start out and then adjust from there. My rig here is, I have a leader and then I have figure 8 knots with tags dropped off with my chironomids. So I have a weighted fly on the bottom, which happens to be a balanced leech today. You can use anything there. You can even use a third chironomid if you want. But this is going to allow my rig to stand straight up and down, and these tag droppers are going to be able to hit different parts of that water column. So this is a really good, easy, basic way to set this up. You've seen in past too our mid stripping video. This is another technique that you can use, and that technique I really like to use in some sort of watercraft. It's going to be much more effective. Your static indicator nymphing is the perfect choice for your stillwater angler from shore. Now, once the chironomid has actually emerged, pupated, and the adult has hatched and flown away, a lot of times that's a really hard life stage to focus on fly fishing. You can do it, but they get off the water pretty quick. So more than likely, if you're seeing fish rising or eating near the surface during a chironomid hatch, it's more than likely they're eating that pupa stage right at the very top, or in that struggling stage when the bug is trying to molt into the adult. However, it can be done. I think a bigger Griffiths gnat or a bigger parachute Adams could probably cover that. It's just not something that I personally focus on a whole lot. When these bugs hatch, they're going to get off the water and they're going to mate. You're going to see these swarms, kind of like you do with mayflies, some mayfly species. You'll see these swarms, and then once the eggs are kind of fertilized, the females will come back to the lake and they'll skitter across and drop those eggs and then go on their way. So in those adult stages, it is pretty hard to focus on in terms of fishing or imitating that, but it can be done. One of the things we talk about this frequently when we're stillwater fishing is we always want some chop on the lake. It's really, really hard when it's glass like this. So I'm gonna sit here fishing the same rig I'm doing, pretty short. I'm about 4 feet deep with 2 chironomids, and I'm gonna hope that this chop picks up. When that chop picks up, it's gonna definitely help things. So if you're ever fishing stillwater and it's glass, you can expect some slower conditions. You want a little bit of wind when you're out there. Just keep that in mind. I want to thank you all for joining us today on this edition of Bug of the Month, where we were talking about chironomids. It's a really dynamic bug. They're small, but what they lack for in size, they make up in sheer numbers. So this is something that you want to focus on. If you have any questions at all, I want you to drop a comment, come into the shop, see us, and we hope to see you out on the lakes here soon. Happy ice off.